Before we begin, hey, amazing viewers! If you absolutely love heartwarming stories about unexpected friendships, cultural connections, and the power of kindness to change everything, make sure you smash that subscribe button and ring that notification bell. Today's story is going to blow your mind and touch your soul in ways you never expected. We're talking about a billionaire's worst nightmare turning into a beautiful dream, a 6-year-old genius who speaks 4 languages, and a community garden that becomes the center of an international movement. Trust me when I say you do not want to miss a single second of this incredible journey. So grab your tissues, get comfortable, and let's dive into one of the most amazing stories I've ever shared with you. Picture this. What if I told you that a single moment of panic could lead to the most beautiful transformation you've ever witnessed? What if a crashed Tesla, a little girl obsessed with anime, and a janitor with secret talents could spark an international movement? What if the worst day of a billionaire's life became the first day of her real life? This isn't just a story about crossing cultural boundaries. It's about demolishing them entirely. It's about discovering that the people society overlooks often hold the keys to our salvation. It's about how a 6-year-old's innocent curiosity can literally change the world. So buckle up, because you're about to witness how 3 strangers from completely different worlds came together to create something so beautiful, so powerful, that it caught the attention of the United Nations, inspired documentary filmmakers from 5 countries, and proved that miracles still happen when we open our hearts to the impossible. This is the story of the Garden Bridge, and I promise you, by the end, you'll believe in magic again. The October sun blazed mercilessly over the concrete arteries of Los Angeles, turning the city into a shimmering mirage of heat and exhaust fumes. In the driver's seat of her pristine white Tesla Model S Plaid, Yuki Tanaka felt like she was slowly suffocating inside a very expensive coffin. Behind her, a convoy of paparazzi motorcycles weaved through traffic like mechanical vultures, their telephoto lenses glinting in the afternoon light. The riders shouted questions over the roar of engines, their voices cutting through her car's supposedly soundproof interior like rusty knives. Miss Tanaka! Miss Tanaka! Is it true you're dismantling your father's empire? Yuki! How does it feel to be the worst CEO in Tanaka Media's history? Are you selling out to American investors because you can't handle a real business? Each question hit her like a physical blow. Yuki's hands, usually steady and confident during billion-dollar negotiations, trembled against the leather steering wheel. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps that fogged the air conditioning's perfect climate control. 28. Yuki Tanaka controlled the largest media conglomerate in East Asia. Tanaka Media Empire owned 17 television networks, 43 newspapers, 12 digital streaming platforms, and 3 major social media companies across Japan, South Korea, and Southeast Asia. Her father, Hiroshi Tanaka, had built this empire from nothing, starting with a single newspaper in post-war Tokyo, and transforming it into a communications juggernaut that influenced millions of lives daily. When he died of a sudden heart attack 6 months ago, Yuki inherited not just billions of dollars in assets, but the weight of an entire culture's expectations. She was supposed to be the perfect daughter, the flawless businesswoman, the living embodiment of her father's legacy. Instead, she felt like a fraud, wearing her dead father's clothes. The panic attack was building like a tsunami in her chest. She recognized the warning signs, the racing heart, the shallow breathing, the sensation that invisible hands were slowly strangling her. She'd been having them for weeks now, always at the worst possible moments, during board meetings, television interviews, important dinners with investors. Today's crisis had started at the Beverly Hills Hotel, where she'd been ambushed by reporters wanting comments about Tanaka Media's stock price, which had dropped 12% after rumors of internal conflicts and possible American buyout offers. The questions had come like machine gun fire, each one designed to provoke, to wound, to expose her vulnerabilities to the hungry cameras. Miss Tanaka, sources say you're considering selling Tanaka Media to Disney. Is this true? Are you betraying your father's anti-Western media stance? Do you feel qualified to run a company this large, given your complete lack of operational experience? She'd fled to her car like a cornered animal, but the paparazzi had followed. Now they hunted her through the streets of Los Angeles, turning her escape into a high-speed public humiliation. The Tesla's speedometer climbed past 70 as she wove between slower traffic on Melrose Avenue. Her vision blurred with tears of frustration and shame. In Japan, losing face in public was a catastrophe that could destroy not just careers, but entire family lineages. These photographers weren't just taking pictures, they were stealing her honor piece by piece and broadcasting it to the world. Her phone buzzed incessantly with calls from her crisis management team in Tokyo, but she couldn't answer. Speaking Japanese would remind her how far she was from home, how alone she truly was in this vast, unforgiving city. Speaking English would remind her how inadequate she felt, how every word came out wrong when she was stressed. The panic attack reached its crescendo just as she spotted a gap between two parked cars. She yanked the steering wheel hard to the right, hoping to lose the motorcycles in the maze of side streets. That's when everything went wrong. The Tesla's advanced autopilot system, confused by her sudden input, momentarily hesitated between manual and automatic control. In that split second of mechanical uncertainty, the car drifted left, directly into the path of an oncoming delivery truck. Yuki overcorrected, spinning the wheel so hard her shoulders strained. The car lurched across two lanes of traffic, missing the truck by inches, but now careening toward a row of parked vehicles at nearly 60 miles per hour. Time slowed to a crawl. She saw a fire hydrant growing larger in her windshield. She saw her own reflection in the glass, eyes wide with terror, mouth open in a silent scream. She saw her father's face, disappointed and ashamed that his daughter had failed so spectacularly, so publicly. The impact sounded like the world ending. Metal screamed against metal. Glass exploded in crystalline fireworks. Steam hissed from the engine bay like an angry dragon. The airbags deployed with gunshot cracks, slamming into Yuki's face and chest with enough force to knock the breath from her lungs. And then, silence. The paparazzi motorcycles had stopped at a respectful distance, their riders suddenly remembering they were human beings witnessing a potentially fatal accident. One of them was already calling 911. Another had dismounted and was approaching the wreckage cautiously, his camera forgotten in his concern for basic human safety. But Yuki heard none of this. Consciousness faded, like a dimming light as she slumped against the deflated airbag, blood trickling from a cut on her forehead, her body finally succumbing to the panic and trauma that had been building for months. The last thing she remembered was the scent of jasmine flowers drifting through the broken window, impossibly sweet and peaceful in the midst of all that destruction. When awareness returned, it came in fragments, like trying to remember a half-forgotten dream. The first sensation was softness beneath her cheek. Not the hard surfaces of metal and glass she expected, but something yielding and slightly damp. Earth, she realized, rich, dark soil that smelled of growing things and recent rain. The second was the absence of sirens, traffic noise, and shouting voices. Instead, she heard the gentle rustle of leaves in a breeze, the distant murmur of water, and something that took her a moment to identify. Children's laughter. Yuki opened her eyes slowly, afraid of what she might see. She was lying in what appeared to be a small forest clearing, surrounded by raised garden beds overflowing with vegetables and flowers. Tomato plants heavy with red fruit climbed wooden trellises. Corn stalks swayed in neat rows. Herbs she couldn't identify filled the air with complex layered fragrances that reminded her of her grandmother's kitchen in Kyoto. This was impossible. Moments ago, she'd been crashing her car on a busy Los Angeles street. Now she seemed to have landed in some sort of urban oasis, a pocket of rural tranquility hidden in the heart of the city. She tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Pain lanced through her skull like lightning, and her vision swam with black spots. Her designer blazer, Yamamoto, purchased in Tokyo just last week, was torn and stained with oil and dirt. Her usually perfect hair hung around her face in dark tangles. "Easy there," a gentle voice said in accented English. "You took quite a hit." Yuki turned toward the voice and saw a man in his 40s approaching with evident concern. He wore faded jeans and a work shirt stained with soil, his calloused hands holding a small first aid kit. Behind him, partially hidden by a cluster of sunflowers, she glimpsed her mangled Tesla, steam still rising from its crumpled hood. The man knelt beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. "I'm Roberto. This is the Esperanza Community Garden. You crashed through our back fence about 10 minutes ago." Yuki tried to respond, but when she opened her mouth, only Japanese came out. Watashi wa doko ni imasu ka? Where am I? Roberto's expression grew more concerned. "I don't understand." "Do you speak English?" The panic attack, dormant during her unconsciousness, began building again. She was injured, confused, and stranded in a strange place where no one could understand her. Her phone was somewhere in the wreckage. Her security team was thousands of miles away. She had never felt more alone in her life. "Tasukete kudasai," she whispered desperately. "Dareka nihongo ga wakarimasu ka?" "Please help me. Does someone understand Japanese?" Roberto's face reflected helpless sympathy. He clearly wanted to help but had no way to communicate with her. He began speaking slowly and loudly, the way people do when they mistakenly think volume can overcome language barriers. "Ambulance. IS. Coming. U. ARE. Safe. No. Worry." Under normal circumstances, Yuki might have found his earnest attempts amusing. But these weren't normal circumstances. The walls of panic were closing in again, making her feel like she was drowning in invisible water. That's when she heard footsteps on the gravel path, and a small voice asking in perfect, unaccented English, "Papa, why is the pretty lady crying?" Isabella Morales had been having the best day of her 6-year-old life. School had been canceled due to a teacher training day, which meant she got to spend the entire afternoon at her favorite place in the world, the community garden where her father tended his herbs and vegetables. She'd been practicing her origami in the shade of the tool shed, carefully folding cranes from colorful paper while her father worked on his latest project, a vertical herb garden made from recycled pallets. Isabella loved the garden because it was full of growing things and interesting people and quiet spaces where she could read her books without anyone telling her she was being antisocial. The sound of the crash had startled her, but her father had quickly explained that someone had an accident and needed help. Isabella had watched from a safe distance as paramedics checked the injured woman and determined she wasn't seriously hurt, just shaken up and probably suffering from shock. What caught Isabella's attention wasn't the dramatic arrival or the crumpled expensive car. It was the language the woman was speaking. Isabella Morales was a linguistic prodigy, though no one had ever used those exact words to describe her. Her teachers knew she was bright, and her father was proud of her excellent grades, but they had no idea that she'd been quietly teaching herself multiple languages through a combination of library books, online videos, and patient conversations with the garden's diverse community of volunteers. It had started with Spanish, of course, her father's native language, which they spoke at home, then English, which she'd mastered by age 4. But Isabella's real passion was for languages that seemed exotic and impossible. Japanese from anime and manga, Korean from K-pop videos, Mandarin from conversations with Mrs. Chen, who grew bok choy in Plot 17. When she heard the injured woman speaking Japanese, Isabella's eyes lit up with recognition and excitement. "Ohayo gozaimasu," she said softly, approaching the woman with the careful politeness her father had taught her to use with strangers. "Good day." The woman's head snapped up, her tear-filled eyes wide with shock. "Anata wa nihongo ga hanasemasu ka?" "You can speak Japanese?" Isabella nodded enthusiastically. "Hai, watashi wa anime ga daisuki de, toshokan de nihongo wo benkyū shite imasu. Anata wa daijūbu desu ka?" "Yes, I love anime very much, and I study Japanese at the library. Are you okay?" Roberto stared at his daughter in amazement. He'd known she was learning some Japanese words from her cartoons, but he'd had no idea she could actually hold a conversation. The woman, girl really, she looked barely older than some of Isabella's teenage babysitters, began speaking rapidly in Japanese, her words tumbling over each other in obvious relief at finding someone who could understand her. Isabella listened carefully, her face growing serious as she processed the information. Then she turned to her father. "Papa, her name is Yuki. She says she's very sorry about crashing into our garden, and she's scared because she doesn't know where she is. She was running away from bad men with cameras who were being mean to her." Roberto's protective instincts kicked in immediately. "Bad men with cameras?" Isabella turned back to Yuki and spoke in rapid Japanese. After a brief exchange, she reported, "She says they're called paparazzi. They follow her around and take pictures and ask mean questions about her work. She says her daddy died, and now she has to take care of his business, but everyone thinks she's too young and not smart enough." Roberto's heart clenched. He recognized the weight of inherited responsibility, the crushing pressure of trying to fill shoes that seemed impossibly large. When his own wife had died 3 years ago, leaving him to raise Isabella alone, he'd felt exactly the same way, overwhelmed, inadequate, and terrifyingly alone. "Dime que está segura aquí," he said to Isabella. "Tell her she's safe here." Isabella translated, "Otu-san wa anata wa koko de anzen da to itte imasu. Dare mo anata wo kizutsukemasen." "Papa says you're safe here. No one will hurt you." For the first time since the crash, Yuki's breathing began to slow. The panic that had been building in her chest started to recede, replaced by something she hadn't felt in months: genuine human kindness from people who expected nothing in return. "Arigato gozaimasu," she whispered to both of them. "Thank you very much." "She's saying thank you," Isabella translated unnecessarily, because gratitude was universal. Roberto smiled and said something in Spanish that made Isabella giggle. "What did he say?" Yuki asked in Japanese. "Kare wa yasashisa ni wa honyaku ga hitsuyu nai to iemashita," he said. "Kindness doesn't need translation." As sirens wailed in the distance, the ambulance Roberto had called was finally arriving. Yuki found herself truly looking at her surroundings for the first time. The community garden was breathtaking. What she'd initially mistaken for a small clearing was actually a carefully planned oasis covering nearly 2 acres. Raised beds filled with vegetables and flowers created natural pathways between different sections. A small greenhouse sat in one corner, its glass panels gleaming in the afternoon sun. Children's artwork decorated a bulletin board near what appeared to be a tool shed. Hand-painted signs in multiple languages marked different plots: the Johnson family peppers, Maria's medicinal herbs, youth group sunflowers, It was everything her sterile, controlled world lacked: organic beauty, community cooperation, and the kind of authentic human connection that couldn't be purchased or negotiated. "This is beautiful," she said in Japanese. Isabella beamed with pride. "Watashi tachi wa koko de kazoku no yu ni kurashite imasu. Minna ga tasukeaimasu." We live here like a family. Everyone helps each other. As the paramedics arrived and began their assessment, Yuki realized something profound had shifted in her understanding of what mattered. 6 months of board meetings and financial reports hadn't brought her any closer to feeling worthy of her father's legacy. But 10 minutes in a community garden, helped by a working-class man and his extraordinary daughter, had reminded her of something she'd forgotten: the power of genuine human connection. Little did she know that this was only the beginning of a transformation that would change not just her life, but the lives of hundreds of people across multiple continents. The paramedics, 2 efficient, kind women named Sarah and Maria, determined that Yuki had suffered a mild concussion and some cuts and bruises, but nothing requiring hospitalization. They cleaned her wounds, checked her pupils for signs of serious head trauma, and recommended she see a doctor within 24 hours for a follow-up examination. Throughout the medical examination, Isabella served as translator, carefully conveying every question and instruction between English and Japanese. The paramedics were charmed by the 6-year-old's linguistic skills and impressed by her maturity in handling such a serious situation. "Has she ever considered becoming a professional interpreter?" Sarah asked Roberto as she packed up her equipment. Roberto laughed. "She's 6. Right now, she wants to be either a veterinarian or a chef who specializes in food from different countries." "Well, she's got the language skills for international work," Maria observed. "I've never seen a kid her age handle complex medical terminology in 2 languages like that." As the ambulance pulled away and the tow truck arrived to collect the mangled Tesla, Roberto found himself in an unexpected situation: hosting a traumatized billionaire, though he didn't know about the billionaire part yet, who couldn't safely drive and had nowhere immediately safe to go. "My car's destroyed," Yuki said through Isabella's translation. "My phone was in it, and I don't remember any phone numbers to call for help." Roberto considered this. His own car was a 15-year-old Honda Civic that could barely fit 3 people, let alone transport someone who was possibly concussed to a hotel safely. "Would you like to sit in the garden for a while?" he offered through Isabella. "Until you feel better and can figure out what to do next?" Yuki accepted gratefully, and Roberto led them to a quiet corner of the garden where he'd built a small seating area from reclaimed wood and old tires painted in bright colors. Isabella disappeared and returned moments later with a thermos of water and a small bag of trail mix she'd been saving for an afternoon snack. As Yuki sipped the water and gradually recovered from her shock, she began asking questions about the garden. Through Isabella's careful translation, she learned that the Esperanza Community Garden had been created 5 years ago on a plot of city land that had been vacant and neglected for decades. "Tell her about how it used to be," Roberto said to Isabella. "Me wa koko wa karapo no tochi deshita." Isabella explained to Yuki. "Gomi ya kowareta, garasu ga ippai atte, dare mo koko ni kuru koto ga dekimasen deshita. Demo community no hitobito ga issho ni natte, koko wo kirei na basho ni kaemashita." Before, this was empty land. It was full of trash and broken glass, and no one could come here. But the community people came together and changed this into a beautiful place. Roberto continued the story, with Isabella translating. Families invested their own money and thousands of hours of work. We brought in clean soil, built the raised beds, installed the irrigation system, and planted everything you see. The city gave us a 5-year lease for almost nothing, because they were happy someone was taking care of the land. Yuki looked around with new appreciation for the work that had gone into creating this oasis. In her world, when she wanted something built or created, she hired contractors and project managers who handled every detail. The idea of an entire community coming together to transform wasteland into a garden through their own physical labor was both foreign and deeply moving. "It must be very satisfying to see something grow from nothing," she said. "Sudesu ne." Isabella agreed. "Demo ima mondai ga arimasu." Yes, it is, but now there's a problem. Roberto's expression grew troubled as he continued the story. The 5-year lease was ending in just 30 days, and the city had decided not to renew it. Instead, they'd sold the land to a development company that planned to build luxury condominiums and a shopping complex. "They're calling our garden an underutilization of valuable urban real estate," Roberto said bitterly. "They say the land should generate tax revenue, not just feed families and build community." Through Isabella, Yuki learned about the community's desperate attempts to save their sanctuary. They'd organized petitions with over 3,000 signatures. They'd attended city council meetings, bringing homegrown vegetables and heartfelt testimony about the garden's importance to their lives. They'd contacted local news stations and tried to generate media attention. Nothing had worked. "The developers have more money and better lawyers," Roberto explained. "The sale is final. We have to clear out everything by the end of the month." As Isabella translated this heartbreaking news, Yuki felt a familiar anger building in her chest. But this wasn't the helpless rage she'd felt toward the paparazzi, or the board members who questioned her abilities. This was the focused fury of someone who recognized injustice and had the resources to do something about it. In her business world, she'd seen countless examples of large corporations and wealthy developers bulldozing community interests in pursuit of profit. She'd always accepted it as the natural order of things, the strong taking from the weak because they could. But, sitting in this beautiful garden, watching Isabella's face grow sad as she translated her father's words, Yuki began to understand that there were different ways to define strength. The families who had transformed this wasteland through their own labor and love, they were strong. The community that had come together to create something beautiful for everyone to share, they were strong. Roberto, working multiple jobs to support his brilliant daughter while still finding time to tend herbs and teach neighborhood children about growing food, he was strong. The developers who wanted to destroy all of this just to build more expensive housing weren't strong. They were just wealthy. And for the first time in her life, Yuki began to understand the difference. "What will happen to everyone when the garden closes?" she asked through Isabella. Roberto gestured around them. "Mrs. Chen grows vegetables here for her elderly parents, who can't afford fresh produce on their fixed income. The Martinez family saves hundreds of dollars a year on groceries because of what they grow in their plot. The teenagers from the youth center come here instead of hanging out on corners where they might get into trouble." He pointed to his own carefully tended section, dense with cilantro, jalapenos, tomatoes, and herbs she didn't recognize. "I get ingredients here for cooking at home, and I experiment with new recipes for the restaurant where I work, but more than that." His voice grew soft, and Isabella had to ask him to repeat something before she could translate. "Kare wa, koko ga kare wo sukutta to itte imasu," Isabella said quietly. "Okasan ga nakunatta toki, kare wa kanashimi de shinisou deshita. Demo koko de shokubutsu wo sodateru koto ga, ikite iku ryu wo kuremashita." He says this place saved him. "When Mama died, he almost died from sadness, but growing plants here gave him a reason to keep living." Yuki felt tears forming in her eyes. In Japan, she'd been raised to value emotional restraint and public composure above almost everything else. But Roberto's raw honesty, filtered through his daughter's innocent translation, broke through years of cultural conditioning. "I understand," she said in Japanese, and meant it completely. As the afternoon sun began to sink toward the horizon, painting the garden in shades of gold and amber, Yuki made a decision that would change the trajectory of her life. She was going to save this place. She just had to figure out how. That evening, back at the Beverly Hills Hotel, Yuki sat at her laptop in a suite that cost more per night than Roberto probably earned in a week. Her head still ached from the concussion, but her mind was sharper and more focused than it had been in months. On her desk, she'd placed one of Isabella's origami cranes, a gift the little girl had pressed into her hands before they parted. Next to it sat Roberto's business card, hand-printed with the address and phone number of Casa Esperanza, the restaurant where he worked as a line cook. For the past 3 hours, she'd been using her company's research resources to investigate every aspect of the community garden situation. What she'd discovered made her stomach turn with disgust. The development deal was dirty from top to bottom. City Councilman Bradley Morrison had fast-tracked the approval process, bypassing the normally required 60-day public comment period and scheduling the final vote during a holiday week when most community members couldn't attend. The environmental impact study, supposedly required for any major development on previously green space, had been completed by Morrison and Associates Environmental Consulting, a firm owned by the councilman's brother. Most damning of all, Morrison's wife had purchased $50,000 worth of shares in Pacific Vista Development Group, the company planning to build on the garden site, exactly 2 weeks before her husband's committee voted to approve the land sale. It was textbook corruption, hidden behind a maze of bureaucratic procedures that most community members couldn't navigate without expensive legal help. But Yuki could. As the head of a media empire, she had resources that most people couldn't imagine. More importantly, she had relationships with journalists, investigators, and legal experts across multiple countries. If she wanted to expose this corruption, she had the tools to do it in a way that would generate international attention. The question was whether she was willing to use those tools for people she'd known for less than 12 hours. Her phone rang, interrupting her research. The caller ID showed her assistant's number from Tokyo. Moshi Moshi, Tanaka desu. Hello, this is Tanaka. Tanaka-san, Kenji's voice carried obvious relief. We heard about your accident from the American news reports. Are you injured? Should we send a medical team? Yuki had forgotten that her car crash would have made it onto entertainment news shows, especially if the paparazzi had gotten footage of the incident. In her current state of mind, the idea of her misfortune being broadcast for public amusement made her feel sick. I'm fine, Kenji. Just some bruises and a mild headache. The car is destroyed, but that's easily replaced. The board is concerned about your extended stay in Los Angeles. Kenji continued carefully. The Nakamura merger requires your approval by Thursday, and the streaming service negotiations with Seoul cannot proceed without your direct involvement. Yuki looked at the financial documents spread across her desk, reports that would normally command her complete attention. Tonight, they seemed like artifacts from someone else's life. Postpone the Nakamura meeting until next week, she said, and tell Seoul I'll conduct the negotiations via video conference. But Tanaka-san, your father always insisted on face-to-face meetings for major... My father isn't here, Yuki interrupted, her voice sharper than she'd intended. I am. And I'm telling you to postpone the meeting. After hanging up, she sat in the expensive silence of her hotel suite, thinking about the conversation she'd had with Roberto and Isabella in the garden. They'd been so passionate about their community, so committed to preserving something beautiful that they'd created together. When was the last time she'd felt that kind of passion about anything? Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Hi, Yuki-san. This is Isabella. Papa helped me send this message. Thank you for being so nice today. I hope your head feels better. I made you another crane. Attached was a photo of a small paper crane, folded from what appeared to be colorful magazine pages, sitting on Roberto's kitchen table, next to a steaming bowl of soup. The simple kindness of the message, a 6-year-old taking time from her evening to check on someone she'd just met, hit Yuki like a physical blow. When was the last time anyone had contacted her out of genuine concern rather than business necessity? She looked around her luxury suite, with its marble bathroom, designer furniture, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering lights of Los Angeles. Everything was perfect, expensive, and utterly soulless. Then she looked at the photo of Isabella's crane, made from scraps and given freely, and realized which environment felt more like home. Yuki made 3 phone calls that night. The first was to Sarah Martinez, the investigative reporter for the Los Angeles Times, whose series on municipal corruption had won a Pulitzer Prize 2 years earlier. "Miss Martinez, this is Yuki Tanaka from Tanaka Media. I have some documents I think you'll find very interesting regarding illegal activity in the Los Angeles city government." The second call was to her company's head of digital media. "I want you to create social media campaigns across all our platforms: Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, YouTube. The focus is community gardens, urban agriculture, and grassroots activism. Start with content that highlights the Esperanza Community Garden in Los Angeles." The third call was to her personal attorney in Tokyo. "I need you to research California real estate law immediately. Specifically, I want to know every possible legal challenge to a municipal land sale that involved conflicts of interest and bypassed required public input procedures." By 2 a.m., Yuki had assembled a battle plan that would have impressed her father. By morning, she was going to turn the power of international media attention on the corrupt officials who thought they could steal a community's sanctuary without consequences. But first, she had a text message to answer. "Dear Isabella, thank you for the beautiful crane and for checking on me. My head feels much better, and meeting you and your papa was the best part of my day. I hope I can visit the garden again soon. Your friend, Yuki." For the first time in months, Yuki fell asleep without anxiety medication. Her dreams filled with growing things and the sound of children's laughter. Roberto was cleaning the prep station at Casa Esperanza when his phone started buzzing, with notifications. It was 7:30 a.m., and the restaurant wouldn't open for another 4 hours. But he'd come in early to help with inventory and to think about whether he could pick up extra shifts now that Isabella's after-school program was ending due to budget cuts. The first notification was a text from his neighbor. "Roberto, turn on Channel 7 News right now." The second was from Isabella's teacher. "Mr. Morales, there are reporters asking about your daughter at the school office. Should I be concerned?" The third was from his cousin Maria. "Primo, why is your garden all over my Facebook feed?" Roberto's hands, still slick with sanitizer, fumbled with his phone as he tried to open the news app. What he saw made him sit down hard on a prep stool. The headline read, "Corruption Scandal Threatens Beloved Community Garden." Below it was a photo of Isabella teaching him how to prune tomato plants, their faces bright with concentration and joy. "What the hell?" he muttered, scrolling through the article. The story was comprehensive and devastating. Reporter Sarah Martinez had documented every aspect of the corrupt land deal. Councilman Morrison's fast-tracked approval process, his brother's environmental consulting firm, rubber stamping the development, his wife's suspiciously timed stock purchases. The article included charts showing the money trail, interviews with community members, and a detailed timeline of how the public had been systematically excluded from decisions about their own neighborhood. But what caught Roberto's attention were the quotes from concerned citizens, who seemed remarkably well-informed about municipal law and development procedures. "This kind of corruption undermines the democratic process and steals opportunities from the people who need them most," said one anonymous source. When wealthy developers can buy city officials to seize community assets, we're no longer talking about capitalism. We're talking about theft. Roberto recognized the sophisticated analysis and perfectly crafted sound bites. This wasn't just good journalism. This was a coordinated media campaign, orchestrated by someone with serious resources and expertise. His phone rang. Isabella's school. "Mr. Morales, this is Principal Watson. We have several news crews asking to interview Isabella about the community garden story. Of course, we're not allowing any media access to students, but I wanted you to know what's happening." "News crews?" Roberto's head was spinning. "How many?" "3 local stations, plus someone from CNN, and a crew from what I think was a Japanese television network. They're saying Isabella is some kind of child prodigy who speaks multiple languages." Roberto closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Yesterday, his biggest worry had been whether he could afford Isabella's school supplies for next month. Today, international news crews were trying to interview his 6-year-old daughter. There was only one person who could have made this happen. He scrolled through his recent contacts and found the number Yuki had given him the day before. "Yuki? This is Roberto. What did you do?" Her voice on the other end was bright with energy and completely unapologetic. "I exposed the truth." "Are you angry?" "I'm confused and a little scared. There are reporters everywhere." "Good. That means it's working. Can you meet me at the garden in an hour and bring Isabella if she's available? I have some things to show you." "Yuki, Isabella is 6 years old. I can't expose her to a media circus." "You won't have to. Trust me, Roberto. I know how to handle media attention, and more importantly, I think I know how to save your garden.